If there are any construction noises, I apologize. Out of my control, but we will carry on. Hello everyone, my name is GingerlyJulie and welcome to a brand new video. Today I am going to be talking about my Clue Legacy Challenge for The Sims 4. This is a video that I have been procrastinating on, I will admit. This is something that has been just long overdue, but today I am going to just be going over some of the rules and kind of explaining a little bit of, you know, the inspiration behind some of the gameplay in this challenge. And yeah, so basically, kind of why did I choose Clue? Just gonna answer that straight out of the gate. Honestly, for me, Clue is one of my absolute favorite games to play. Not only that, but the 1980s film that starred Tim Curry honestly is one of my feel-good movies. It is a go-to for me, and yeah. But if you don't know what Clue is, it is essentially a board game in which you are trying to solve the murder of Mr. Body, and it's honestly just this really cool game of speculation and whodunit, and you're trying to find out among 6 suspects who did it, with what, and where in the manner that you are playing in, that, you know, killed Mr. Body. And I always thought that it would be very interesting to kind of have it in The Sims 4 in a legacy setting, and there have been a couple of challenges out there that people have released for a Clue-esque type of legacy challenge, but I just never really felt like those were, you know, very engaging, nor were they very central to the characters in the generation that you are playing in. And that's something that I really wanted to focus on, was the characters themselves within the generation, rather than focus on a whole bunch of killing in the legacy. But don't worry, there is some shenaniganery in some of these generations, I will admit that. But let's just go ahead and jump right into the first generation, which is the mustard generation. And don't really look into why I chose mustard as the first one. It's simply because, well, yellow is my favorite color. Also, just as a quick disclaimer, since this is a legacy challenge that I've created completely on my own, a lot of the rules to this legacy challenge are definitely subject to change somewhere in the future. So these rules are simply just how they are right now, and they've been perfected about as much as I feel like I'm comfortable with sharing. And yeah, so if they end up changing somewhere down along the future, don't worry, you know, I'm not looking to change it within, like, you know, the next year, you know. But that being said, if things do change, don't worry, you know, I will update you guys, no worries. So starting off with the mustard generation, this is the founder generation, and with my own personal opinion upon legacy challenges, most legacy challenges allow you to start out with 1500 simoleons, but to me that is just a little bit too much to not really be hopping aboard the struggle bus all that often, you know. So for this generation, I have you start out with only 1000 simoleons, and you start out living in, drumroll please, Strangerville. Some of you are going to hate me, some of you are going to love me, but that is all up to you. But the reason why I have this generation start out in Strangerville is because it's a very military-esque type of town. And of course with Mustard, the character is a colonel, and so segue into the career, we are in the military career, and I would say even going into the officer branch, because of course I thought it would be very fitting to just kind of plop the first generation into the world of Strangerville, because it's very weird over there. There are quite a few setbacks when it comes to what you would probably usually do in a legacy challenge, which, you know, would be foraging and really utilizing the gardening skill. But in Strangerville, you can't do that. Not unless you play through the Strangerville mystery itself, but that is not a requirement for this generation for now. That being said, though, the character of Colonel Mustard in and of himself, the Colonel is very much all about the money. In some games and in some storylines, they are known to be embezzling funds, and sometimes they are completely hacking off military equipment onto the black market in order to, you know, have a little bit more money than what a colonel's salary would actually be paying for. So with that, the aspiration for this generation is the fabulously wealthy aspiration, because of course we want to get rich, and we will be getting rich however fast and quickly as we can. Along with that aspiration, the traits for this legacy challenge, the traits I very much did pick up a lot of inspiration from Lil Cinzy's Not So Berry challenge. I tried to correlate the traits with also the fundamental values of the character, while also kind of sticking to a color theme, because I thought that that would be like super duper cool, because obviously these generations are named after colors, so you know, it would be very fitting to have the traits correspond to the color that you are on, generation wise. So for this generation, you have ambitious, you have clumsy, and you have socially awkward. And the reason why I chose socially awkward over loner is because in the Clue movie, Colonel Mustard is very much this boisterous person, but he stumbles through every single conversation that he has, you know, and you find out in some juncture that sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's very much a misleading tactic in order to confuse the rest of the people. But other than that, he very much is someone who fumbles over his words, does not think before he speaks, and is just all in all this very, you know, overly confident but very awkward person, and it's incredibly hilarious to watch. If you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend a good watch. And as for any other requirements for this generation, of course, completing the career and the aspirations are very much a huge thing within this entire legacy, so I'm not gonna keep repeating myself by saying that you have to complete the aspiration and the career. That is just a given at this point. But as for skills, the big skills that you need to complete or max out are the handiness skill, the charism skill, which is gonna be a little bit difficult. I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be a little bit hard. You also need to complete the fitness skill and the rocket science skill. And the rocket science skill is simply because in the Clue movie, the Colonel is working on the next fusion bomb. So obviously there is some rocket science to be had in there, whereas the handiness of fitness is more or less to kind of help along with the military career. But you know, it is what it is. So this generation is just, it's kind of lax in terms of things that you are required to do, but I kind of said that intentionally because this is more of just like, you know, the foundation. You're trying to set yourself up for the next one, which the next generation that we have on this list is Generation Green. For this generation, you are going to be moving, once you are able to, you will be moving over to Evergreen Harbor, and you will be specifically living in whatever lot is available in the Grimm's Quarry. And the reason why it is in the Grimm's Quarry is because, well, the eco footprint of Grimm's Quarry is very good. But in your generation of being Generation Green, you have to find ways to lower that eco footprint. Yeah, we're getting a little evil now. And not only that, but you also have to make sure that you have blackmail on all of your friends and all of your family. So utilizing that little blackmail monitoring device in The Sims 4 from Strangerville is going to be very optimal. As for the career for the Green generation, in the board game, technically Mr. Green is oftentimes a reverend. But because The Sims 4, you know, historically has zero religion in it, which is fine by me. You know, there is no way to kind of have that as a career, nor as really as a lifestyle. So I went with the alternative option, which is what you oftentimes see as kind of like a second hand, is a politician. The politician career can, you know, be very, very stressful, can be very repetitive very quickly, but it is what it is, and it was just what I could think of as the next best thing. As for the traits, I strictly went with the green traits that I could find, which were materialistic, vegetarian, and jealous. Now these don't necessarily correlate with Mr. Green as a person. In some storylines, he is considered as very materialistic, very much about making the greenbacks, if you know what I mean. Especially when he is depicted as a politician, because he's all about endorsements and, you know, gaining money from his sponsors in order to keep up his election and everything like that. So there is that aspect of it. And the aspiration for this generation is world famous celebrity. Whether that is good reputation or bad reputation, that's completely up to you. But definitely, you know, would be interesting to see some people trying to have a good reputation while also being an absolutely terrible and despicable human being. So I'm just saying. And as for the skills that you need to max out, the research and debate is a big one, and the charisma is a huge one, especially for the politician career, along with the mischief skills. So that is it for the green generation. Now moving on to peacock generation. So for this generation, you are going to be living in the beautiful neighborhood of San Seqouia, and you are going to be befriending every head of household that you possibly can within San Seqouia. You don't have to go and do every single world, just simply the one that you are living in, which will be San Seqouia. For this generation, I decided that the career is going to be interior designer, since that one is very much more gig based, and it's always fun to kind of, you know, play around with the freelance. But also, I'm just thinking about Peacock as a character. She's oftentimes depicted as a housewife, and I thought that would be incredibly boring. So, you know, what better way to kind of, you know, depict, you know, being a housewife without actually being a housewife as, you know, coming into people's homes, redecorating them, you know, and giving that homely feature. And luckily with this generation, the traits very much did kind of align a little bit better than they did in the green generation, in all honesty, because you have the perfectionist, the kleptomaniac, and the family-oriented trait, which that family-oriented trait is going to be very, very interesting, considering how you have to marry 3 times. That's right. We're getting a little bit on the dating scene. But the catch is, with marrying 3 times, you cannot just divorce them. Absolutely not. We are going to be collecting a little thing called inheritance, if you know what I mean. However, because this is a clue-based type of legacy and the killing has only just begun, every single spouse that you have has to die in a different way than the last spouse died. So say the first spouse died from a cow plant. That means that the other 2 spouses cannot die via a cow plant. So whatever method that you choose for those spouses cannot be used again throughout the longevity of your sim. Sorry, I made the rules, and yeah, actually I'm not that sorry. And of course, because I just felt like it was going to be super duper fitting, the aspiration for this generation is going to be the Villainous Valentine, because I had to stay on theme. I mean, can you blame me? However, as for the skills for this generation, we are going to be kind of swerving a little bit in kind of the different direction. So the skills that you have to max out are the gardening, the flower arrangement, which could always be to your benefit, wink wink, and the baking skill. But moving on to the plum generation, where you will be living in the beautiful city of Copperdale. Now for this generation, you are going to be in the education career, and because the Plum character in Clue is called Professor Plum, I would advise you to stick with the professor branch. I'm just saying. As for the traits for this generation, they're a little bit on the nose while also kind of being like, what the heck was that last one? But you have the genius trait, the paranoid trait, and the party animal trait. So those are going to be very interesting, just seeing them all at once. But honestly, genius and paranoia, aren't they just one and the same? If you really think about it. The aspiration that you have for this generation is the archaeology scholar, and by proxy you also have to max out the archaeology skill, the logic skill, and the vampiric lore skill. Another requirement for this generation, while it does sound like it is done, for this generation you actually have to adopt the heir for the next generation. That means that you don't go off and get married and have a kid. You can be married, but you cannot have your own offspring. They have to be adopted. And so whomever it is that you adopt will be going into the orchid generation. Now this one is definitely going to be a little bit fun, or you're going to hate me if you are playing on a short lifespan. But for this generation, you are going to be in the doctor career, and you will be living in Brindleton Bay. Also, you will be attending university, but you will specifically be in biology. And if you adopt the child young enough, you can also pick which traits they have later on in life. And so the traits that you should look out for or should pick for your heir are the high maintenance trait, adventurous, and self-absorbed, because we may look pretty and we're gonna stay pretty, but we like a little bit of thrill, if you know what I mean. And of course, if you couldn't tell by the chosen major and university, the aspiration for this generation is going to be the freelance botanist, and by proxy you will also be doing your best to grow a death flower, which is an absolutely intricate, complicated task that is honestly just mind-boggling, and every single time that I try to do it, I just end up cheating and going into hidden objects. So yeah. And since we are, you know, kind of talking about death, for this generation you have your option of killing someone either via a cow plant or from a death flower arrangement. And then next we are zooming right on into the Scarlet generation. This one is a lot more about the glitz and the glamour, because for this generation you will be living in San Seqouia with the actor's career. I also thought that the traits for this generation were very, very fitting for the Clue character themselves, with the evil trait, the romantic trait, and the hot-headed trait, because oftentimes Miss Scarlet, the way that her character is written in the Clue board game, she very much gives off this femme fatale kind of persona. Like, she's very good buddies with Mr. Bunny, but she's very misunderstood. You know, like, would she really have been able to kill him? You tell me. She's just a movie star. However, unfortunately for this generation, you will be having to build up a bad reputation, and you must have the public enemy aspiration. So those are definitely not going to be going in your favor in terms of ever convincing someone of your innocence. The skills that you have to max out for this generation are the acting, of course, piano, fitness, and singing, because Miss Scarlet is all about the entertainment business. And then finally we come to the white generation. For this generation, you will be going into the culinary career and you will be living in the lovely Oasis Springs. And of course, because you are going into the culinary career, the aspiration for this is, for this generation is the Master Chef aspiration. Mrs. White is oftentimes depicted as a chef or Chef White in the board game. In the Clue movie, she is just depicted as this widower, who, you know, is once again more of like a femme fatale type of deal. But I did want to touch more onto the basis of the board game and go with the chef and the culinary path, because I always find those to be a little bit more fun, and it's always really nice unlocking all of the dishes that are in The Sims 4. I just always find that really cool because they pull from so many different cultures. So the traits that you have for this generation are the active trait, the music lover trait, and the creative trait. They don't really correlate too much with the character of Chef White or Mrs. White all that much, but they are the white traits that we are dealt with, so we will just make do with what we have. On top of moving over to Oasis Springs, another requirement for this generation is marrying ultra rich, and you have to have a house that is worth at least 100,000 simoleons by the time that this generation dies out. The skills for this generation that you must max out are, of course, the cooking and gourmet cooking, along with the cross-stitching and the wellness traits, because, you know, we may be a chef, but we do have a sensitive side to us. Namaste. And that is all for the main challenge of the Clue Legacy. I did want to give kind of an option of whether or not you wanted to do just the main 7, because honestly, Dr. Orchid, it was more of an add-on later on into the game, and they kind of booted out Mrs. White into the board game, which is why, you know, you only have those 6, but I wanted to include Mrs. White into this because she was part of the board game for so long, but the rest of this challenge is very much optional. So if you want to end on the white generation, feel free, you know, to just end it there, call it good, say you beat the legacy, congrats, you've won a gold star. But if you want to kind of extend the madness a little bit, you can play the international side. And so we will be getting into that here in just a little bit. For the international side of this challenge, we are starting off with the brunette generation. So for this generation, it was definitely kind of fickle, because the persona of the brunette character in Clue, he is a paint forger, so there is a little bit of not much malice going behind this generation, in all honesty, because it is very hard to actually forge a painting in The Sims 4 rather than just creating a painting or creating a copy. But for this generation, you will be in the painting career, and have the painter extraordinaire aspiration, because of course. In terms of where you are living, you will be living in Tortosa, and you will own a gallery. And because you own a gallery, something that I think is really cool that you can do is that you can actually set your own prices. And you have to sell at least 5 poor quality paintings at an extremely high and exorbitant price, because that's the best way that I could think about forgery. I'm sorry. For this generation, you have to have the traits of hates kids, gluttony, and animal enthusiast, because none of those at all correlate to the brunette character in the Clue game, but they're the only brown traits that we have. So yeah, the skills that you have to max out, of course, you have to max out the painting and the charisma skill, along with the mischief skill and violin, because why not? We're artsy fartsy after all. But then after brunette comes the peach generation, and for this generation you will be a style influencer. The thing about Miss Peach in the Clue board game is that she's very much of the assistant secretary type, but I didn't want to stick into the kind of business office type of setting just yet. So the best thing that I could think of is style influencer, because Miss Peach, the way that she is portrayed, she is very, very stylish. You know, she is very, you know, chic and all that good stuff. That being said, you will be living in Del Sol Valley, and because Miss Peach is low-key a bit of a jealous person, although we do not have the jealous trait. For this generation, you must spark up a romantic interest in someone who is already married and find a way to kill off the spouse. Because if you can't have them, nobody can. And of course, because we are just such a lovelorn type of person, you will have the soulmate aspiration along with the traits of cheerful, foodie, and loyal. The skills that you have to max out for this generation are the photography skill, writing skill, and the dancing skill. No real rhyme or reason behind these ones. This just was part of the legacy challenge where I was like, you know what, let's start getting into skills that people probably don't usually try to max out. So yeah, photography, good luck. And then moving on from a nice peachy beach, we go into the gray generation. For this generation, you have to be a detective, because the gray character in the Clue board game is of course a detective. So why wouldn't we, of course, utilize the only policing type of career that we have in The Sims 4? However, because Detective Gray in the Clue board game is very much of a corrupt policeman, a requirement for this generation is that you must fail at least 2 crime scenes while you are on the job, because the detective career is also a very interactive career for any player. So good luck trying to intentionally fail something for once. On top of that, the aspiration for this challenge is the Chief of Mischief, because you were always trying to cause a stir. You must live in the Moonwood Mill world of The Sims 4, because I just thought, you know, it's gloomy and it's, you know, kind of eccentric and it's got a mystery to it already. The traits that are for this generation are the gloomy trait, the neat trait, and non-committal. The skills that you have to complete for this generation, however, are the logic, handiness, and research and debate. So they're pretty much all things that we have done before, but are very practical to the gray generation as a whole, you know, career-wise, aspiration-wise. Next, we are into the rose generation, and this is where things get a little bit interesting, because for this generation, your career is going to be freelance paranormal investigator, or as I like to just simply call it, mediumship, because that's pretty much what it is. You're living a giantly long episode of Long Island Medium. This is personally a career that I have not really played with, but Madame Rose, as she is called in the board game, is considered a medium, and there is some speculation as to whether or not she is a phony, but she is known to be very flamboyant, very dramatic, you know, but she does claim to talk to people beyond the veil and all of that good stuff. So of course, being a paranormal investigator would be top tier for this generation. The traits for this generation as well are unflirty, proper, and cat lover, because they're, you know, kind of the most pinkish traits that I could really find. There aren't a whole lot of like super pink traits without really venturing too much into the red area, which we've already done with the Scarlet generation, so I didn't want to pry a little bit too much into those. But on top of being a paranormal investigator, you also have to have the Strangerville mystery aspiration, because this generation is pretty much all about madness, and luckily now that we have kind of like a trait earning aspect from the Growing Together expansion pack, one of the traits that you have to try to earn is the erratic trait, because I mean, she's supposed to be insane, so of course. And for this generation, you must also live in Sulani with the Island Ghost slot trait. So that is definitely going to be very, very interesting. As for the skills for this generation, you must do the acting, mediumship, obviously, and entrepreneur, because honestly, an entrepreneur will just help you in the long run when it comes to the services that you you know, are able to perform. Next up, for one of the last generations that we have here, is the Azure generation. So the Azure character in Clue is very eclectic, very regal, very much like I am the king of my own country. So I've never been told no kind of characteristic. But unfortunately, when it comes to, you know, much brighter blue type of traits, we are pretty limited in The Sims 4. So the traits that we have are the loves outdoors, goofball, and erratic, you know, because he is also kind of woohoo, you know. But I think it's safe to say that any character throughout this Legacy Challenge is kind of off the rocker a little bit. However, since being a prince or king is not something that you're able to do in The Sims 4, you can also be a criminal for this generation. So that is the type of career for the Azure generation, is the criminal career. Since Prince Azure is the collector of very fine things, this generation's aspiration will be the curator. And on top of that, you must live once again in Brindleton Bay, because it's a seafaring type of environment, and what better place to go to embezzle than a seafaring town. And then as for any skills that you have to complete for this generation, of course, charisma is a really big one, along with Salvadorian culture and programming. And on top of that, one of the only requirements that you have for this entire generation is that you must marry your worst enemy. Who didn't say we were going to get a little bit enemies to love us in this house? Who said? And then finally, we are moving on to the very last generation that we have for this entire Legacy Challenge, which is the Black generation, or Generation Body. For this generation, you are going to be playing as the one and only Mr. Body, who is the only person that we don't have a whole lot of information on, other than he loves blackmail, all about business, and he just makes enemies wherever he goes, you know. It's pretty much what we got. And so, because I figured that, you know, since Mr. Body is someone who, you know, is very much eccentric, and because I absolutely love the kind of middle of nowhere mansion, but, you know, very, you know, over the top type of mansion vibes, for this generation you'll be living in the Forgotten Hollow world. And on top of that, you will also be doing the business career and have the aspiration of Mansion Baron. So you gotta have the best of the best and be in the top of the bid. The traits for this generation, I unfortunately had to kind of reuse one of them, but honestly, that's okay. It's the last generation, so honestly, doesn't really matter. Plus, we don't have a whole lot of black, you know, themed traits in The Sims 4. So I went with Kleptomaniac, which we used in a previous generation, but also the geek and slob traits. So good luck keeping anything neat and orderly. On top of this all, you also have to max out the piano skill, the logic skill, charisma, and fitness skill. But something that you have to do before you end on a high note of this Legacy Challenge is that you must die with no heirs, no loved ones, at a party that you are hosting. And with that, that would be the end of our legacy challenge. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you want to, at the end of this video, there is going to be a playlist for the Clue Legacy Challenge that I'm currently playing here on this channel. So go ahead and click that subscribe to kind of play along or to watch along. Don't be afraid to kind of give me a little bit more pointers in the comment section, because like I said, this is a legacy challenge that I created completely by myself in my own messed up head, so maybe some things don't make a whole bunch of sense. Maybe there are some generations that are just a little bit too hard to do, so there's a little bit too much jam-packed in there. But yeah, go ahead and leave me your thoughts down in the comments below. Also, what are we thinking about the blonde hair right now? Don't get too attached. I am actually planning on dyeing my hair a completely different color. So let me know what your speculation is down below as to colors, you know, that I'll be putting in my hair. But as always, I hope you all stay safe and you stay sane, and I will be catching you guys in the next video. Alright? Okay, bye!